The answer to is Blake Shapen, the answer is yes. It's squarely yes. The guy did not have a very good game on Saturday. I'm not going to brush that off and try to just skate by it and make a big excuse for him. The atmosphere should never be a factor for an elite quarterback. That's a very harsh statement for someone sitting behind a microphone to say. I get that. But look at guys like Bryce Young, who played the national championship last year. The moment, despite them losing, was never too big for him in the playoff, the SEC championship, even the national championship. The moment just can't be too big. There can never be something, an atmosphere, a noise level that a quarterback who's at an elite level is not prepared for. Guys go out week in and week out in the SEC, in the Big 12, in the Big 10, in the NFL, who are elite quarterbacks and deal with the craziest environments out there, and they still play through it. They can keep a level head. There's not an excuse for why Blake Shapen played that way that can fall on BYU fans. Like, oh yeah, I played bad because the fans were loud. But I also don't think Blake Shapen's saying that. Heard from another source this morning. Shapen sat in the locker room after most of the guys had already left, headed out to the bus. All the families and the girlfriends and everybody, they're standing outside Lavelle Edwards. And we got to see that a bit as the media walking out of Dave Aranda's press conference as the players started to trickle out and meet with their parents. And I remarked to someone, where's Blake Shapen? The source said that Shapen sat in the locker room, fully dressed, head to toe. He's in all of his stuff, just like surrender cobra, staring into the abyss, sitting on a bench in the locker room, thinking about the game. This is a game that really weighed on a guy who his coaches lost confidence in him. The coaching staff wasn't wrong for that either. He was missing throws. I mean, that last throw of the game where you've got to score a touchdown on 4th down and goal from the 12, you have to. He didn't put it in a realm where Seth Jones could even try to catch the ball. You got to give your receiver or somebody a shot, and he just overthrew everybody. It was just a bad game from Shapen, but he didn't shake it off quite like Dave Aranda and the rest of the guys did. And what that shows me is a whole lot of care and respect for this football team and the idea that it started to sink into Blake Shapen that he is the guy. That when push comes to shove, end of the game, when you got to make a play, there's one quarterback. The ball is in your hands and you have to do it. Understand that, yes, Blake Shapen had played in big games in the past before, but there's a very big difference, especially for a younger quarterback, when you are the guy. You are the starting quarterback for a season. When a university literally gave another person, another player, the opportunity to transfer. The starting quarterback, Gary Bohannon, was given the opportunity to transfer so that Blake Shapen could start. They dethroned a Sugar Bowl quarterback for Blake Shapen. So much pressure is now on you. And this season takes a completely different, there's a whole new weight that's placed on a guy like Blake Shapen when that is given to you. You know how tough that is to deal with? Again, it's not an excuse, but at some point over the course of the year, he wasn't going to be perfect. The guy, Rome wasn't built in a day. You can't learn it all in a day. You got to go out and get shellacked. And Aranda said at the post-game press conference, it's not like Aranda wanted to lose. He didn't want to lose, but he was prepared in case this team lost. He said on Saturday, you probably heard it on yesterday's show if you listened, that the coaching staff met midday on Saturday and said, look, what happens if we lose? How do we approach this as a teaching moment, as a learning moment? Even if we don't lose, we don't play that well. What can we do to teach these guys over the course of the game so they can learn for games in the future? Blake Shapen was probably the A1 guy that they'd circled when having that conversation. He's a young quarterback, gnashing teeth in the middle of an unbelievable environment. He's going to get kicked in the mouth. How's he going to respond? Obviously, it was too late to respond on Saturday. They didn't give him very many opportunities to throw the ball in the second half and overtime either. And honestly, the passing game wasn't working hardly at all. 18 for 28, 137 yards and a score. There was like one possession where the passing game looked solid, but outside of that, BYU just had everything sniffed out. So I get why they didn't throw the ball, and I get why they weren't as confident in that side of the game. But they also understood that this is where Blake Shapen's going to learn. And that's why, to me, the answer is still yes, that Blake Shapen is that guy. It is so tough for a quarterback to come out and just be perfect every game. And Shapen's pretty much given Baylor that. Look at the Texas or the Albany result. 17 for 20. It's 85% completion percentage. A couple of touchdowns. Guy had 214 passing yards. There really wasn't much else. We said it on last week's shows over and over again. Blake Shapen was pretty much the brightest spot in that game against Albany. If there was a unit, a person you're looking at and saying, wow, that guy, that group did really well, as Blake Shapen. He carried himself that way, hit some impeccable throws. The deep ball is back in Waco. Remember what we were saying a week ago? Shapen, even despite the competition, looked so good. And there were guys who, with that level of competition that Albany brought, didn't look good, and Shapen wasn't one of them. Even dating back to last year, Oklahoma State game in the Big 12 championship, started 17 for 17, finished 23 for 28, 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. The guy won Baylor a Big 12 championship game, and he was injured so much so that he wouldn't play in a Sugar Bowl a month later, but still played in the second half of that game. The Texas Tech game, 20 for 34, 254 yards and 2 touchdowns. By the way, has still not thrown an interception in his Baylor career. Kansas State game on the road. That was the most impressive one to me. Comes in relief of Gary Bohannon, who had gotten hurt. Goes 16 for 21, 137 yards. Didn't log a touchdown, but kept Baylor in that game to eventually win it 20-10. The defense was so solid. Shapen has given flashes of really, really spectacular stuff as a Bear. And I don't want to completely erase all of the superlatives that we've given him, all the great things that we've said about him, because one game doesn't erase those. If you think about this, if you in your life over the last 2 years have said, Blake Shapen's a really good quarterback, or wow, Shapen's got great zip on the ball, or he's so accurate, or his deep ball is spectacular, the deep ball's back in Waco. If you've said any of those things, you've thought any of those things, they're still true. One game doesn't flip all of that around and nullify Blake Shapen's ability. You can't take what the BYU game was on Saturday and be like, well, that's it. Quarterback sucks now. That's not really how it works. It's not how it's going to go for Blake Shapen either. The offensive line is still elite. They still showed a lot of good stuff on Saturday. I thought that of the 4 sacks that Blake Shapen took, I thought 2 or 3 of them, probably 3, were on Blake Shapen holding on to the ball too long. That's a learning point. Blake Shapen getting outside the pocket, creating his own space, trying to run the football, and making plays running the football. That's a learning point. Blake Shapen hitting guys in the breadbasket, receivers coming across the middle, trying to tuck it and run instead of hitting them, or at least hitting them where they catch it and aren't immediately blown up. That's a learning point. All of these things are being discussed by Sean Bell, Jeff Grimes, Eric Mateos, Dave Aranda, everybody in film this week. That one game of him playing bad does not make him a bad quarterback down the stretch. He is still the answer. Sean Bell, Dave Aranda, Jeff Grimes are much better quarterback evaluators than me or you or anybody else out there. They picked Blake Shapen over Gary Bohannon because the ceiling that he has. The game against BYU on Saturday does not change that. I can sit here and keep saying that he had a bad game, and I probably will because it is objectively true. But I can also tell you that he was devastated after this loss from everything that I've heard, and that there is only one gear Blake Shapen has had at Baylor, and that is get things done. At no point has this guy rolled over. He won Baylor a Big 12 championship against Oklahoma State, again, hurt to the point he wouldn't play a month later in the Sugar Bowl. There is not a part of Blake Shapen that will not use Saturday as a learning point that makes him exponentially better. He's still the guy. His deep ball is still really good. He's still wildly accurate. He might go out against Texas State and throw 4 touchdowns and 350 yards. It's quite possible. Baylor's got a whole lot of pent-up stuff that they've got to get out on Saturday, and he's going to be a square part of that. So before you get all down and out and start calling for Kyron Drones to get in there and be the next quarterback, or Luke Anthony from Louisiana Tech to get in there and be the guy next week, just know that Blake Shapen still has it. He is still the answer for Baylor. He still has a ceiling that is Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year caliber. Even if it's not this year, his ceiling in the next year or two at Baylor is to be that guy for this team. He just needed Saturday. That's a slap in the face. You take in stride and get a whole lot better for it. And thank God it happened on Saturday and not in week 13 against Texas when both teams are playing their last game of the season with who knows what on the line.